Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Creative Design for Competition and Certification. And we're putting on this class tonight. And if you have any questions at all, I would encourage you to open up the chat and put your questions in the chat. Raise your hand if I don't see it too. There's a area that you can raise your hand. But I'm monitoring everybody myself. So anyway, I would encourage you to be able to ask. I'm going to cover a lot of stuff tonight, but we're going to going into it and just starting here with just challenging yourself. So I'm Sandy Schreck from Lembush Roses. I'm customer education coordinator there. And it's exciting to see so many people registered and that I'm sure people will be coming on to the meeting as we keep going here. But it's really an important thing to me to keep this competition and certification going because years ago, I actually was one of the winners of the, when I was North Central Florist Designer of the Year. And it was one thing that really changed my life. So I grew up on a farm. I started in flowers like in 4-H, doing demonstrations and stuff. And having the opportunity to compete allowed me to challenge myself. And so that's why it's really important for me to stay involved in this and bring that challenge to other people so that they can continue to grow and challenge themselves too. So, so first off, we're gonna go into the section of competition, kind of starting with that. And then the second part is going to be more the certification. So when we go into that certification area, if you're not interested in that, you can drop off too. We are going to be recording this, and so it will be available on YouTube for later review, or if you have friends that are competing or employees that are competing and not able to be here, you'll be able to share that with them. So this year, for the North Central Florists, we are doing the theme of Garden Party Glam. And so I think this is a really fun theme. We saw Fleur de Ville. Okay, why am I? I'm echoing somehow. Are you guys hearing me echo?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you echo. Yep.
You are?
Yes, you are.
I can hear you too.
It's echoing or it's playing?
No, it's echoing.
Okay. All right.
I think somebody must be unmuted that needs to mute maybe.
Okay. Yeah, if everybody can mute, and I mean, if you want to talk or ask a question, you just hit the space bar and that'll unmute you. But with the popularity of Fleur de Ville this year that we had at the Galleria, showing kind of fashion statements, I was inspired by that and chose the Garden Party Glam theme. And so we have one entry that's going to be designer choice. That would talk to kind of that theme. And then the second entry is going to be a floral couture hat that blends floristry and fashion. So they're able to use a pre-made hat, which would be like a container. So it would be considered like a container for your arrangement. Or you can make one from scratch, which will definitely add to your creativity points. We have over $3,000 worth of prize money. We have the sponsors back. The Minnesota State Fair, Kohler and Dram sponsoring the top 10, and Lembush Roses sponsoring the finals. And so we are able to add a nice amount of prize money. Okay. Let's do that. Okay, I think everybody's muted right now. Hopefully the echo quits, but Anyway, so that's just another little side incentive, but we're excited to be able to bring all that back and have those participants, those sponsors, to be able to make this a great experience for everybody. So the number one thing as you're thinking about competing or certification, you need to think like an evaluator. It's not like you're doing something for your cooler or your customer. These designs are different than your everyday designs that you sell in your shop on a daily basis. So the judges are evaluating on the evaluation criteria. So you kind of need to think about those evaluation criteria that they're judging with as like customer requests. So a judge wants line, balance, and proportion. A customer walks in, they want lilies, they maybe want purple and yellow. They'll specify colors. Those are their customer requests. Now, when you're competing or getting certified, the evaluation criteria is your customer requests. So all of it is based on the elements and principles of design. But when you're competing, all of those things are pushed to the next level, elevated. So proportions, rather than standard proportion, which is 1.5 to 2.5 times the height or width of the container, it's going to be extended. So it's going to be more like 3 times, maybe 4 times the container, or you want it to be a statement piece. You want it to push the elements and principles to a more knowledgeable level. And so that's where you're really kind of pushing those limits and stretching yourself beyond what you put in your cooler on a daily basis. So second part, you should review the rules. Think about, understand all the details needed. Some things to consider. It says you need to create 2 designs that reflect the theme. The overall theme is that garden party glam. So it just needs to have that sort of theme with it. And you're going to put a 4x6 card with it that's going to explain your interpretation. So that will help the judges to understand your interpretation. All the items that you use need to be listed on the cost sheet. So in my experience, when I've designed for competition, I put a notepad right next to my design. And as I put something in, I put it on the notepad. And then once I get done, I have somebody else, if you have the opportunity to have somebody else, but have them come over and call out everything that's in your design and make sure that it's on the list. And it even all has to have a cost value. And so you will, if you have found items or items that were yours from a long time ago or something like that, things that you're using that are keepsakes, you just have to put a value on it, like a garage sale value or a thrift store value at least. And even like a rock from out in the garden, you would put a value on it. It doesn't have to be much, but it has to be something. So just want you to be aware when you bring your designs in, the display spaces are all going to be numbered. Most of them are all around view, so our 360 view, but there's 2 tables on the sides that are up against the wall. And so then you would just have the front view, and you're not going to know which one that you're going to have. You'll draw a number, and there's one side that has white numbers and one side that has green numbers. And the 2 designs will be placed on different sides of the room. So they do not need to coordinate or be any part of each other. They can be totally different. They could be the same. On your cost, the max total cost per design is $120. So you don't need to spend that much. It's your choice if you want to. The product judge will make sure that all the products that you have listed, you have some value, and gather materials. And then props do need to be listed with a value with the exception of on the hat. So you see the star on the bottom, the floral couture hat. The display vessel does not need to be listed on the cost sheet. So you can use a hat base, and a hat base would be listed on the cost sheet. But so if you display it on a vase or a mannequin head, that does not need to be listed in the cost. So we do have another change this year. And so we measured the tables and trying to max out space for everybody. So it's a 30 by 30 space. The best way to do that is when you're creating your designs is to take masking tape and just tape out a 35 by 30 space on your table. Give yourself a little bit of leeway for when you transport. I got disqualified one time because my Singing in the Rain umbrella busted a little bit when I transported it and my lily grass was over the line. So I learned my lesson. There many years ago, and but so you want to think about having a little bit of leeway with that 30 by 30 so that if things move a little bit on transport, you're going to be okay. You do bring your arrangements pretty well done, but you do have time in the room to make some adjustments, do some finishing touches, and do that, but you just need to be out of there by 7:55. So the fresh product within your design needs to be 60% or more. So if you max out the dollar amount, $120, $72 is the limit of the 60%, and then the hard goods would be 48. That would be if you would max out your cost sheet, but we do want to have them predominantly be fresh arrangements, and we have a lot of people that come and view these, and it'll be exciting to see the interaction with the customers, potential customers and stuff at the fair. And they really get a kick out of all the designs. And we will have People's Choice again this year. It's going to be a scanned barcode, so there's no counting of ballots at the end, which like if anybody's been there on Thursday, it's always a struggle to get everybody's ballots all counted. A couple of other requirements on this, a 4x6 card with the theme for each description is a required element. So if you do not have that card or the cost sheet is a required element too, but that you have to have those two things with your design to have it be qualified for judging. So in that description really helps the evaluators know how you interpret your theme. So one of the things that you're evaluated on is the aesthetic value, originality, creative application of the theme. And so that is a great way, and it's just 1 or 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences max. That's typed out on a 4x6 card. You can just do it on a piece of, like on a Word document, and cut it out and tape it onto the card anyway, but we just want to have kind of a consistent size. The cost sheets are picked up before the public viewing comes in, but the descriptions stay with your design. So it really drives a lot of interaction with the customers, and it also drives the People's Choice. And you hear conversations throughout the day about, oh, look at this one, this is this is that. And it's like, oh, I think I like this one better. And, but for the first part, the judging is blind. So on those sheets, do not put any company information on them. Once the judging is complete, we do print out your names with your shop number or shop name and place those signs with your arrangement. So we print them on a half piece of paper on cardstock so that you can be identified and use it as a marketing opportunity. If you do want to bring business cards, you can bring them in a Ziploc bag. And then when you draw your number, we'll write your number on that bag, and it'll be placed in the bin with your number. And then once the judging is complete, we'll place those by your designs as well. And then just one more thank you for Kohler and Glenbush and the Minnesota State Fair for sponsoring this, and it really makes a big difference. So when we talk about designing to the evaluation criteria, you really just need to dig into that and think about it just as an evaluator would. Now, today, we do have quite a few of the evaluator team on this call so that they're hearing the same thing that we're telling the contestants and the people that want to get certified. So it's not about evaluators just looking for deductions. From our standpoint, we want to reward as much as we are doing deductions. So you look for things to give you points rather than only what you find is wrong. So when you start looking at it, the next thing that you want to realize is that on the evaluation sheet, there are different point values for some of the categories. For examples, mechanics, line, rhythm, and form, color, and texture are all worth 15 points, while the other categories are worth 10 points. So you want to start doing that checklist, and you'll get this. We've got these printed up, and the first mailings are going to go out this weekend with the tickets and stuff. I'm picking them up tomorrow, but you'll get this. And so as you're making your design, I want you to be your own evaluator. Take a look at this checklist. Use it as a checklist. Do I have all of these things in it? Do I have a strong line? Do I have a strong focal? And so just make it be a checklist and start thinking about it. And as you're designing for competition, it's going to elevate your skill level when you're designing on a daily basis. So all of these practice things that you're doing that may add some creative flair to a design and add that extra touch. Once you get more comfortable with it, then you can start adding that into your daily stuff and really elevate that work so that your work stands out above your competition. So some of the things we're going to talk to that would add creative flair into a design is doing some tailoring. So tailoring is taking a leaf and maybe cutting it into a different shape or removing some of the side shoots so that it's a cleaner line. You can manipulate it by twisting and turning it, cutting it in half. Do something with those materials to alter them so that it draws you into a design. Like as a judge, you want to be the one you walk up to and it's like, oh, that's cool. Look what they did here, and the judges are all very experienced judges, but even myself, you walk up to something and it's like, wow, that was a great use of material, or look at what they did there. And maybe, you think about it. I've always been inspired by Mark Bass, and he did things and he turned stuff different ways and did stuff upside down. And so I walk up to her, think about things, and it's like, what would Mark Bass do? So think about who inspired you and how you go from there. And so for me, one of my first, I was at Bachman's first, and Dan Kotecki was there, and he was testing to be certified for AIFD. So I think most people are familiar with Dan here in Minnesota, and he's won the competition twice and now is elevated to be one of our evaluators. And but he is one that I really learned so much from, and his use of mechanics and sun here. So when you look at a design, like how does it elevate to that professional level? So professional application of mechanics means there's no tape showing. There's no way that you can see how something is being held up. Your basic foam is being covered. If you're using midnight foam, you need to alter it from its original appearance to have it be an exposed mechanic. So it shouldn't still be just the square block that you have gotten. It should be altered in some fashion. So change it into some different shapes or decorative shapes so that it becomes a decorative element. Last thing was your exposed mechanics need to be consistent. So everything is really based on the elements and principles of design. And so as we kind of go back to those, elements of designs are like the observable components. So it's the recipe. It's the flour, the sugar, the butter, and the milk. So it's line, color, form, pattern, texture, and then space and the size that you make it, and then the fragrance. So those are all the things that the flowers are. And the principles of design is the guideline for how you put those together. So as you're making it, you have to have balance, physical or visual balance, and physical and visual balance. And so then think about proportion, like how long are they? How big are they? Which direction they are, and how are they in proportion from the arrangement to the container and each thing. So you start looking at that. Dominance is a big thing, especially when you're competing and doing some extended lines. You still have to your eye still has to come back to one location. So it's a focal area or a focal emphasis or one point. So sometimes in the more European designs, a focal point is not as strong as in American design, but there's still visual pathways that's going to connect one element from the bottom to the top all the way through. So it might even be a zigzag pattern in the more advanced designs. So you just need to be aware of those, not only just the focal point, but focal emphasis areas and accents and how the whole design composition works together. So contrast, you can see in the bold print is the primary principle of design. And then the big change in the second edition of the AIFD manual, which is the current edition of this manual, the secondary principles of design are changed to be labeled ancillary concepts. So if you are testing for CFD or AIFD, you need to be aware that secondary principles of design technician or technical term now is called ancillary concepts. But that just as one. So as we go in, so here is, and it's a little bit easier to see on the evaluation form that you'll get in the mail, but just kind of coming into what are the things that we're taking into consideration for the criteria. And so it's technical execution and mechanics. And the way that I have this listed on here, the way this judging form is set up is like, what are the things that are more subjective and objective? We'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation, but so the technical execution and mechanics is the top thing that you look at. So can I see foam? Can I see tape? Is the mechanics, if there is exposed mechanics, is it consistent? So if you can't see it, then that's a reward. So you not only look for the deduction, but you look for, wow, this is all really, really well put together. I can't see any way that they've attached things that are differently. So then you reward for that on that. And then next we come into like focal emphasis and dominance. And we're going to break down each one of these categories. So we'll kind of go through, but this is just a checklist and you'll get that checklist in the mail. But so here's where we go into execution, technical execution and mechanics. So this right here is proper construction. So poor flower quality is a mechanic's deduction. So the hat is going to be something most likely that won't have a water source. Now, we do have things like a hydration chamber that works really well. So you can make sure that your flowers are well hydrated to start off with before you put the thing together. I did some testing on that, and I am very impressed with that technique and feel like you could even, if you make a hat the day before, you would be able to use like a big plastic bin and put it in the cooler, and you just put a layer of paper towels down, and that's what your hydration chamber is. So there's also finishing sprays that you can use, finishing touch and crowning glory, so that we make sure once the judging's done, you're not going to get any more deductions if your flowers fail. But at least when you bring them that morning, through judging at noon, they're going to need to look good, or it's going to be a mechanic's deduction. And hopefully with your name on it, you're going to want to make choices of flowers that are sturdy enough to make it through 2 days at the fair. And of course, it will be windy and hot. And so just take that into consideration. So on bridal bouquets or body flowers, and so the hat could potentially be picked up for figuring out balance. So if a flower falls off or falls out, it's a mechanic's deduction again too. So visible tape or glue would be a deduction as well. But not being able to see it, how it got put together, and having all of those things concealed are reward. So if you're using, when you're thinking about like designing in foam, the biggest tip is to not use more foam than you need. So you want to have it be sturdy enough that it can go in your car and travel to the fair, but think about having the least amount of mechanics to hide. So if you have some sideways insertions, you might extend your foam up above the lip of the container. But if you don't, I wouldn't extend it much above the lip of the container, and it's less to hide. I don't have to put a big clunky moss or a lot of foliage there to be able to just hide the mechanics. But so in the case of exposed mechanics, like within binding and banding, binding, it should be the same amount of strips. So if you use bind wire, if you fold it over, it has 4 strands on it. And so it should be consistent. And as you go around, you should have it be consistent from this way too. So if it's banded on one piece of branches this way, it's going to be banded on the next branch that way. So if you see that consistency, that again is a nice reward. So if one is all crisscrossy and one is straight, and it's put together, so it's held like mechanically sound, but it's not very professional applications, then it's going to be kind of a wash. It's going to be sound, but you're not going to get that reward of that consistency. So that just talks to. So our next category is 10 points. So focal emphasis or dominance. So it's just looking at the organization of your materials and thinking about what is the area that the eye is most naturally drawn to. So emphasis is achieved within the area of dominance. So if you don't know, you can't figure out which one, or sometimes the biggest fail is that there's multiple areas of dominance and they're competing, and one needs to win over the other. And essentially, as you're making your design, there's going to be a primary line through your design. And then there's going to be an accent line, so a secondary line. And at the connection between your primary line and your secondary line is where your focal area really should be. And in American design, it's predominantly right above the edge of the container, because your container becomes part of your composition if it's visible, and it becomes an area of dominance in itself. So coming from the container up to the focal point is a good way to go, and so that people understand that visual pathway. So they look at the container, and then from there, they can see where to go within the design. If you're not sure, the other thing to do is just close both eyes, open them up, like where does my eye go to? You can also do one eye, and that takes it from the 2D to 1D. So that's what the camera sees. And oh, here. Patty, are you still getting echoes? Sorry, I just see somebody's getting echoes. I think if everybody mutes, I think we're okay. But so close one eye, and that takes it from the 2D where you see through the design to 1D, like what the camera sees. And then take your finger and just kind of trace what's the visual pathway that you see within your composition. And it's a great way to kind of figure out where you might need a little bit more of a focal emphasis, or whether you have a good strong piece, and then where you might need an accent line to kind of bring you back in through the composition. All right. So next we're just going to look at something on here. So if you start looking at your daily design, so the design on the left is probably something that you have pretty similarly in your cooler on a daily basis. And so it's kind of more of a one-sided design, a hospital design, some transparency, just with some basic flowers, a couple unique flowers in there, but it's pretty basic design. Now, if we're thinking about competition, that design is going to be like average. So that's going to be the middle of where you say average is. And when you talk to average, what I call average is like when you open a wire service book and you see the roundy moundy designs or one-sided designs, and there's some a little bit more different designs in there, but that is the average. So that's the standard. So in order to be able to elevate your designs, you want to think about what different thing can I do to create this design and elevate it. And the one on the right you see is the same flowers, but it's done in more of a grouping style, and it's done on a horizontal plane. So it's just elevated by putting it on that horizontal plane and coming in. And some of the flowers are done in groupings a little bit more. We have a little bit more impact with the focal area coming in and coming back and forth, just a little bit more offset, some lines coming in. So on that, the originality would be a little bit higher. Now, is there tailoring done to any of the foliage or flowers? Not really. So they're all still in their original condition. So on here, like, would you elevate it by editing some of those leaves off the fern so that you would get a stronger line and less emphasis on coming in? And so just changing all of that, but looking at it, checking off the color and the texture, the depth. So you can see here how you see the color come from one side to another, the sunflower in the focal area, and then we see one that you see that's taking you to the back of the design, and the stock too. So front and then back. So even on the photo here, you can see that there's depth within it. And we see lines created, but So this is elevated beyond average, but probably not to excellent because we haven't done a lot of creative flare techniques. So we'll just start going into some of those. As we're looking at these different designs, so balance and proportion is your next category of analysis. And each design should be physically and visually stable. And thinking about the placement of flowers and foliage where they are on here, the proportion of each element to its friends is a proportion as well too. So is one element much larger than all the others so that it's more dominant? So thinking about the proportion of the container to the arrangement, the sizes of the flowers on here, the proportion of the myri fern was changed by doing tailoring down at the base. So if that was full there, it would be a lot, have a lot more impact on this. But using some of that cleaner line on that myri, it adds repetition to the simple lines that we see coming from the lily grass on the other side. That are enclosing the structure and adding a little bit of negative space into it. So each design should not feel like it's tipping over. When you have some of these pieces with liatris and stuff, you want to think about looking at from the side. So an evaluator is going to go in and they're going to be twisting their head around. If your design is up on a wall, they will kind of, back into it. But a lot of them with the 360 view, you are able to see all sides of the design and figure out the placement of how things go with each other. And then thinking about the dominance and balance and proportion of all the elements. So as I'm looking here, I pull photos of my designs that I have done over the years. And so you look at this and it's like on here. So it's kind of a small call out, but do you see the lowest calla that's going out this way? So do you see how the other two are like curling up into each other and they're like friends? And then we have one that's going out this way and curling down that way. And so I probably didn't notice it in real life, but then when you look at the photo now here, it becomes very apparent, like that is interruptive of the visual pathway. So if that calla was turned and up and friends like with the other two, it would enhance the repetition and enhance the line because then it would be in line with the two myri fern. So even little details like that can make a big difference. And so as you're looking at your mechanics and your flower placement, think about how they're all working together and if they're friends and they work together to bring that unity. So balance on here. So we talked about visual balance and physical balance. So like this is one of those containers that's a little bit tippy, one of the eco-essentials from Smithers Oasis, but we have foam in it here. And then we actually used one of the tillandsias on one side. So that brought a lot of visual weight to that side. And so you still have to balance that out. So how we have that strong, lighter color item on one side, we have the flowers predominantly on the other sides, but using the two flax leaves to extend the height and give it visible balance. So what it did was created that strong stem, straight stem, that makes it feel like it has a place to go and that it's not visibly too heavy from this side to the other. So if you took off those two leaves, then that tillandsia on the right side would be more dominant and it wouldn't feel balanced. So it's not only about physical balance, it's visual balance and looking at your designs and making sure that they feel like everything works together, that it's not falling over either way, and turn it to the side and make sure it's not tipping backwards. So one of the things, if you are doing certification or a live test, many times you're going to be doing it on like a banquet table. That's a 30-inch table. And if you're used to working on a high table and all of a sudden you're working on a low table, like your perspective is changed. And that's when we see a lot of those designs that are kind of tipping backwards because people are kind of reaching down and their perspective has changed. So if you're a taller person, one way to do it is to empty one of your buckets, turning your bucket upside down, and elevate your design to your normal design workstation level. And so it's just something to be aware of if you're doing certification or a live test. Scale and proportion is our next category, and on it here, so scale and proportion is the elements of one to another, or like all of it to the container. So the container on the left, you can see, is a reverse proportion, where the container is actually more dominant than the arrangement. So the arrangement or the floral elements have a horizontal presence that is similar to the height of the container, but it's not 1.5 to 2 times the height or height of the container or the width of the container. So sometimes they're reverse proportion or it can be inverse proportion, but just be aware of that difference and to use a container in a different way. So when you get the containers, if you're doing a surprise package, like, maybe use it sideways. And Dan was a really good at that, where he would use something in a different direction, and you're able to be creative on that, and then think about how those elements relate to the container and how you can make it bigger. So like on the bottom, we have a smaller glass vase, and we were able to extend the proportion on that by doing some bamboo that comes across the middle with the floral net on it that it's wound through, that extends that proportion of that container, and it becomes more dominant horizontally and kind of extending those proportions. So line, rhythm, and form is 15. So this is your visual pathway and the interest that it creates. So rhythm is like the musical influence on how you move from one element to another. It's how, just like songs or notes on a bar, they're going to be that rhythmic movement from one element to another. So a lot of that is creating visual pathways and then thinking about repetition of those elements to how they all come together. So form refers to like the overall 3D shape of an arrangement. So our eyes see geometric shapes. So you see squares, you see triangles. On here, this is an inverse triangle where it's more of a teardrop shape. But we see those shapes and connect those shapes within design. So you may have elements within a composition. Way to create depth is on your focal area is to add a triangle of 3 other elements that will connect in your mind's eye, that bring more attention to that focal area. So they would be like a different color so that your focal is still strong. But an advanced placement is doing groupings and here. And so here I reiterate that wire service is average, and dotty floral placement is average. So the old roundy moundies where you have little cloud of baby's breath over it, or you have one daisy here, one daisy here, one daisy here, one daisy there, and it's all around that dotty placement, that is going to be considered average too. So doing those advanced grouping placements are going to elevate you and get you rewarded for that. So how do you move from one side to the other? So how does the eye continue through your design? That's that rhythm. So how do you be able to move from the front to the back of the design, or what is the geometric pathways that connect as those implied lines? So when we talk to line, there's a number of lines. And so static lines are the straight lines, and they can be vertical, or they can be horizontal, or they could be diagonal. So straight lines can be any way, and the visual interest and the energy comes in with the dynamic lines. So dynamic lines are the curving lines, and they bring movement and opposition into a composition. So having that contrast between the static lines and the dynamic lines is an elevated design style. So knowing how to blend those two to add that contrast in. And then, so line can be actual or implied. So actual line is how you can see from the freesia, you've got a straight line that goes down into the container. So then on implied lines, so you see the spacing between the carnations that are in basing. So you see like this, this, and this, but they connect together as like a visual pathway of that repetition. So that's an implied line on how those pieces connect together. So some are visually and some are implied. Thinking about line development, you want to think about creative placement of components. So this is another example of the same recipe, the same floral elements used in 4 different ways. And so thinking about using that negative space as just as important as what the flower placement is. So having that negative space, add those voids and the purposeful areas of rest so that other areas get more attention, is a great way to add drama and creativity to your designs. So thinking about placement, symmetrical, asymmetrical, integrated is, I have a drawing, but so integrated may be the horizontal placement and a diagonal placement within the same composition. So, or it could have some horizontal placements, and then some other basing may be done with a radial placement. So that would be like a grouping. So if you did a mound of dianthus that was grouped together so tightly that you couldn't see. So if you do 4 dianthus and do it in a mound, and all of them feel like one unit, that is clustering. And then grouping, it still has its individual pieces. So then they would be at different levels so that you could see that it was 4 green trick into that design. So line development, you want to think about what's a creative line development. And this is one of the designs that one of the last times I competed and got into the finals here. So I created a circular pattern here, and thinking about what are the opportunities to use florals and extend those lines and really bring that basing, thinking about coming in, stem placement, your radial, spiral, abstract, integrated, or parallel. And parallel would be that the stems always, if you draw a line through the horizon line, and they still would never meet as long as you extended those lines. But on here, and just repeating that if you're going and you're looking at your pieces and you have some foliage, like you can see some of the foliage that was added in here, I really removed a lot of leaves from it. So you want to think about tailoring or pruning some of those foliages so that they are not dominant over your floral lines. Here you wanted to be able to see the lily grass lines and the calla lily lines. So adding a lot of other foliage, I wanted to add the textural element of that vine, but not a lot of the foliage that adds crossing lines within your composition. So if we think about lines, there's always going to be kind of a primary line. And as we look at this easel piece, so you can see the primary line comes in, it does have two different flowers. So we've got roses on the top, and then we come down into carnations, but the color is the same from the top of the bottom. So you definitely see a primary line come through there. Then we see a secondary line come through with the tie leaves in that burgundy tone, and you see another line that comes through. Then at the intersection of those two is where we've got the tailored sunflowers, where we remove the yellow petals from them, and to not add, that's thinking about the color harmony within this composition. So by taking the yellow out of that, I still have the yellow green that kind of comes from the solidago, but it pulls you in and out of the sunflowers. But I pick up more of that brown tone that we have on the tie leaves that brings you all together there. And then the leucadendron just come off and just accent that primary line on there. So just thinking about groupings, focal point, and pathways, thinking about how they lead you in and out of a design. So rhythm here is the visual movement through a design that's achieved through repetition or gradation. So just going from one piece to another, it can be also done with cleaning up. So if you have one liatris that's clean all the way down and one liatris that still has the foliage all the way down with the crossing lines, then that is going to be like an interrupted rhythm. It is like you don't know exactly what to do with it. Our Alstros both are pretty well cleaned up. They have a couple leaves on them, but both of them are the same. So you come down from the liatris, down into the couple Alstro, we go down into the basing. That's done with the green hydrangea, and then come over and back up into the stock area there. And then we have a couple of lines that are done with the equisetum and the bamboo that add repetition as well. And so those are interrupting lines, and you can see how the spacing between them is similar. So that spacing between them becomes that rhythm too. So it's the transition between elements that brings that emphasis to it. So depth and space on it here. So placement of materials at different levels and at different depths as well. So you want to think about having some transparency in an arrangement so that you can see that there's depth within it. So when I come in, that flowers aren't facing to me, that it doesn't draw me into the design. So rather than something be straight out at you, what we're going to do is tip it so that it brings you into the design so that you can see some of the other elements and some of the other levels. We want to see some of the flower in your focal area coming in, but you don't want it to be like a stop sign that stops you in your arrangement. You want to be able to go into that arrangement. So you want it tipped a little bit into the design that then is going to lead your eye into that composition. And here you can see how we've got the equisetum, kind of one coming forward, one backwards, and you can see how they interact with each other and add that transparency and that transition throughout that composition. So just diagonal placement adds that tension to that design. So texture and with depth, thinking about texture. So diagonal and horizontal pathways are a great way to be able to achieve depth. And on here, you can see with that canella berry, we've got a strong visual pathway coming diagonally across that composition. On the other side, we have the black bearded wheat done in another diagonal position, and then the foliage done in another diagonal position. So you see the cochias have a strong piece there. But you see those diagonal placements, and that really draws your line throughout that composition back and forth and adds so much depth to it. And then the different textural elements that we see from the rosemary, that's more of a fine texture. The aganis, that's more of a feathery texture. The wheat versus the canella, and then the branches and the pods. And then you see within the composition, so the pincushion protea as comparison to the chrysanthemums. So everything adding that contrast and texture and those visual pathways that helps to elevate this composition. So space is the area in, around, or between the components of the design. So it is the whole composition, but it is occupied as space, positive space is occupied by material. Negative space is left empty to enhance contrast and definition. So a void, and this was one controversial thing when I was on the board at AIFD, like what is a void? So essentially it's an unplanned space and arrangement. And it took me a long time to understand it, but like a connecting space. So if you look at a stem on roses, and so if you have 5 leaves on there to start off with, there's still space between the leaves that is a void, but you can take off maybe 3 of the 5 leaves and just leave 2 leaves on it. And then you still have the stem, but you have the space from the head of the rose down to the first leaf. And if that's exposed, then that's a void. And so that was the best way that I've found to explain that. But connecting space is the way that they have it. So it's different than negative space. So in other words, basically negative space used in our daily designs can increase perceived value. And so that's the big change in design, where for a while we had those roundy moundies and where every flower was touching another flower. Now we're spreading those out. I mean, we have to, because of the visual value that we need to be able to get. And you want to have space for your flowers to be able to mature. And just the whole garden style where it's more in and out and interactive designs rather than just a mound of flowers. So now we're seeing these open up where they've got different components that maybe go a little bit different directions, but leaving space within a composition for flowers to be able to mature, and also using that element of space to create depth within your composition, and it's going to create visual interest and value. Yes, Kathy. I see a hand up. Oh, you have to unmute you. Kathy, yeah. Push your space
Okay,
bar.
can you hear me now? Okay,
Yep.
on the last picture, would you still call that negative void, or would you say it's there's another term, tailored? Would you say that those leaves are tailored?
So tailoring
void?
is what you did to the leaf. So tailoring was removing a portion of those leaves. So you see the palm leaf here.
Yeah.
So the tailoring is the process of removing the leaves here in the center.
Okay.
And what it created then was a void from the top of the leaf to the bottom of the leaf.
Okay. Thank
So
you. Thank
the
you.
tailoring is the process and the void is the result.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Okay, unity and harmony. So it's the aesthetic quality and cohesive relationship of your elements. So harmony refers to the placement of materials, and unity is the cohesive relationship between those materials and the container. So harmony is when you look at something, you don't want to start singing that song like one of these things is not like the other, you know, the old Sesame Street song. And you want it to have it feel like a color harmony that goes together and that the elements of the composition go together. And then unity is the oneness of purpose. So it makes you feel like all of the things are belonging together. So in the proximity of them, like one's not hanging over the edge and doesn't feel like it's connected to the design, the repetition within the design. So regular or irregular repetition, and even or uneven. And then radiation is from the middle, and then gradation is largest to smallest. So kind of thinking of all those things on how they go together. Harmony as another factor is unity within that. And so unity here is within the composition. So the variegated aspidistra leaves are a little bit different, but yet they feel like they're cohesive because of the way that they're used was repetitious. So proximity of each other and using those repetitious techniques makes that unity and harmony come together. And so it makes it feel like it's one with the container. So color and texture. So color is going to be a big thing. And if you're doing competition and you're provided with flowers, you can look at it. And if you have to make multiple pieces, like if you're testing or something, you do not want to use every color in every design. So you want to think about like how you could differentiate. Maybe one arrangement is more monochromatic and one has a different color harmony. But thinking about the relationship of the floral that you choose. So the colors are definitely going to be like color harmony. So you do want to be familiar with the color wheel. And one of the most used, sorry. Oh my gosh, big sneeze and can't come out. That's because I'm nervous here to sneeze. An analogous color harmony. And so this is one of the color wheels that I like because you're able to kind of move that around and think about 3 to 5 colors that do work together. And so that's a popular way to do some color harmonies. And then, of course, there's other complementary or split complementary, the primary colors. But we're seeing analogous and monochromatic be a lot of our colors. And then in event work, we're definitely seeing that whole polychromatic color harmony come in. And polychromatic is the use of multiple colors that don't go within a color harmony. So they're kind of all over from all sides of the color wheel. And so you do want to think about color harmonies and the textures within your composition. Thinking about colors, if you're doing monochromatic, you're going to think about tints, tones, and shades of those same colors and how that they work together. And so you may have something that has burgundy in and it has light pink in. So that's still going to be a monochromatic color harmony because it's all within the red side of the color wheel, or the red primary color, but it's different tints, tones, and shades of that color. So thinking about your color harmony, and then also the impact color has emotionally. So color is a power which directly influences the soul. So anytime you see something, if you see something yellow, it makes you think of sunshine. Blue makes you think of the sky and the sea, and it's more relaxing. Green makes you think of nature and more harmonious. And orange is going to be something that gives you energy. And red is going to make you feel like sometimes about like stop. Stop signs are recognized. So you want to think about that emotional impact of color. And then think about the other part about it is the vision, or the senses that you get from color. So sometimes browns, shades of browns can make you think of coffee or chocolate, and might bring back great memories of that. Another impactful color choice is white and yellow. So you really need to be aware of the effects of white and yellow within your composition. So white and yellow are those colors that really draw your eye and reflect a lot of light. So they are going to impact potentially like your color balance, your color proportion, the scale of it from one component to another. But you want to think about like the warm side or the cool side, or if you're mixing those two, what the balance is. Some advancing colors are more the warm tones, and the cool colors are more receding. So if you're using more of a polychromatic color combination, you have to think about how your eye flows through that composition from one color to another, and taking the visual weight of a color into consideration, as well as the size of that element that is that color. So if you have a dark presence of like a dark red dahlia that is high up in a design, and there's a yellow component underneath it that feels like it's less dominant than this, then you're going to have some balance or proportion issues within your composition. So thinking about where the colors are, how they balance in, how they feel visually and with their weight visually, and on how they affect the line within your composition and the values. All right, so theme development is another area that this last year, the theme was Woodland Wonder, and Bill Junko of, I can't think of his shop name, sorry. He actually got first place within our bridal category. And so here you can see the originality in this. So theme development and originality. So it was the overall impression and beauty inspired by the completed arrangement. So it was a unique presentation of the materials. It had to be all green. And the Woodland Wonder was kind of the theme. So you see the woodland elements that are in, and then just the unique take on the bridal bouquet. And so it just is kind of challenges the obvious. And when you looked at this piece, you just wanted to pick it up and say, wow, that's really cool, you know, and like, wow, how did he do that? So you want to make an evaluator look into your design and say that is a really unique presentation, and just done it really well. And this is where, you know, like my inspiration was Mark Bass many times, and how he would change things and use things upside down and just kind of bring the wow factor or the cool factor for me. So as evaluators, when we talk about it here, so there's objective values and subjective. So everybody has personal favorites. So personal favorites are your subjective things. And for me, I love line and I love color. So if I look at those things first, I'm going to make a judgment on that design right away on like I like this design. So as an evaluator, what you have to do is kind of go down the list and you essentially look at one component at a time. And if you have favorites, you kind of want to skip over those until the end. So you should really start with like the more objective things such as mechanics. You can see that everybody's going to be a little bit different, but my pattern of looking at designs first is looking at mechanics. So it's either you can see the foam, you can't see the foam, tape, no tape, like reward or deduct. And then the focal emphasis. So where does the line go? Where's the color? What does the color do that brings it to an area of emphasis? So scale, is it proportional to the container and the area that it's in? So depth, you can see, does it have visual pathways that lead you from the front to the back? And is there some transparency that I can see through it and it allows me to know depth on it? Then I go to category interpretation. So this is where I'm going to read the sign and think about how it feels to me on how they categorize. So then I'm going to look at balance and look from the side and from the top and make sure that it feels visually and physically balanced. And then take a look at the unity, like does everything belong together? Then I'm going to come into line, thinking about the movement and the rhythm, color, what's the balance, harmony, and rhythm that it's created. And then lastly is creativity. So different evaluators have different levels of personal knowledge. And so creativity is your most subjective because it's really based on your exposure and your knowledge. So if you're been exposed to European design a little bit more, then when you look at something that's a little bit more contemporary US design, it's still not going to be at the level of what some of the European design is. But what we're going to do is think about what's the average US average, our area average versus the worldwide average. But so thinking about that creativity and rewarding for anything that you see, it's like, oh, that's cool, or oh, I like how they did that, and anything that makes you look into the design. So that creative flair that you add within your composition. So on your two pieces, so for each of the designs, they'll be scored by 5 judges. And the designs will be the highest score and the bottom score are dropped. So it's the 3 in the middle that become your score, and that eliminates that objectivity and subjectivity. So, for my judges, you don't want to be the highest score and you don't want to be the lowest score. You want your score to count so that way it's in the middle. And anyway, but just thinking about there's enough space with the values that we have that you can reward and deduct. So in each category on each side, so within the designer choice and within the hat design, there's going to be top 10 prizes that are $50 each will be given out in each of those categories. And that's sponsored by Kohler and Dram. And then when you combine both designs, so that total is combined, and then the top 6 rise out of that. So you have to bring 2 solid designs. You can't have one that's excellent and you get top 10, and the other one you did in a hurry because you spent too much time on this one, and that one brings you down. So you want to think about coming with two excellent designs and having them be added together and then elevate you. So the top 6 then will be invited to do an Iron Chef style finals. And so that's a design off that's on the dirt stage at 6 p.m. And that's sponsored by Lembush Roses. And there's $1,300 in prize money for those finalists there. And so if you are a finalist, you'll be notified by 2 p.m. and you'll need to be at the Peg restaurant, which is outside the Hort building at 5:30 with the competition starting at 6. You'll draw for a number position and you are invited to bring a cheering audience, but no yelling out like move that to the left or stop or anything. No design advice allowed. And so you have 10 minutes to look at your design or look at your product and pull the sleeves and kind of take a look, sort it out, and prep the product. And then 30 minutes of design time, and then 5 minutes of cleanup. Judging will start at 7 p.m. and then the winner's announcement will be at 7:30. So just going back, design development product process. When you open your surprise package, you first want to think about, you'll be given a category. So you'll be given some sort of design element or design style that you need to do, and a little bit of a theme, like maybe who this is for or where it's for. So you want to analyze the category as it relates to the design pieces that you have. And then choose or create a vessel or a mechanic to be able to hold that arrangement. And then determine your form. So are you going to do asymmetrical, offset, geometric, more contemporary design style, formal, linear? So you choose that design style, then think about your stem placement, radial, parallel, abstract, or integrated. Thinking about what kind of design applications, look at the materials. Is there a weave that you can do? Is there banding or binding you can do with any of the materials to add that creative flair? On the foliage, could you alter it so that it has a different appearance and tailor it or to create some different lines just to elevate that composition? So then start with your dominant line, add that secondary line, reinforce it, focal emphasis, and this just kind of comes down. Reinforce your dominant line to create depth. Add the basing techniques that are in a purposeful and organized fashion, using a variety of materials, but it should be subordinate to the focal area. And showing groupings, which is an advanced knowledge of design, adding accents and detailings to the material to provide additional interest, and then reviewing your design to make sure that you have professional application of mechanics. So just coming back, and this is just everybody, we'll email out this copy of this manual if you would like. But so this just is an easy check guide here on the AIFD definitions for the elements and principles of design. So that's kind of repetitious of the things that we just went through. And then thinking about, once again, professional application of mechanics. So cover all the foam. When it's used as a mechanic, foam should not be visible from all angles. And on the case of plastic cages and such, your handles and all your plastic in general should be covered. Mache backs can be left exposed, and you should have no visible tape. Use foam to lock foam into a container. So I use some of the side scrap pieces to be able to push down to lock the foam into the container. and use the least amount of foam possible so that you have less to hide. And then on U-glue, have a titanium scissors. Glue should not be visible. Just be aware that floral adhesive can burn foliage, so you want to think about flower quality and how things are going to last once they're removed from water source. So bridal bouquets, you would, so this year we don't have a bridal bouquet in our competition, but other years we have. So you would have a vessel or a stand that it was in, but you don't want to decorate it or attach it, because if you do, then it has to be considered part of the bouquet. So any display thing that you would put the bridal bouquet into would just be a container versus something that is decorative and attached to it, so that it doesn't distract from your bouquet. And bridal bouquets during any kind of evaluation can be picked up. We check for balance, see how it sits in the hand. If a flower falls out, it would be laid on the table and mechanics deduction would be taken. The next evaluator would review the remaining design and score it accordingly. So if your focal flower falls out, then the next evaluator is going to evaluate it as the whatever's left. And so you want to think about, so sometimes if you get your evaluations and we do document when flowers fall out, if they do or anything like that, because maybe 3 evaluators came and everything was fine. By the time the 4th evaluator picked something up, then something fell out, then there would be a mechanics deduction that wouldn't be on the first 3 evaluators, but it would be on the last 2. So you can see that change happen. And so to avoid that, just make sure that you use Oasis glue on any of your flowers that have a downward presence and might fall out, to ensure good mechanics. So, and then just thinking about what are design techniques that add that creative flair. So manipulation and grouping. So on here, like you see, the rose has the center pulled out of it. On the cremin on the other side has a button put on top, and then you see the buttons down on the bottom that have the decorative element that's added to it. So just things that you can do with basic materials that elevate the composition. So, and as you're looking at it, it's like consistent application, product grouping, braiding, tailoring, thinking of uses for broken flowers, sometimes using like carnation stems, or pulling, if the color combination doesn't match, like the carnation, you can pull the petals out and just use the cup of the carnation as a floral element too. So what are some of those things that you can do, detaching or abstracting flowers to create some different things? And then thinking about framing and banding and binding. So framing is creating that negative space and using an element to create a line that goes around, visual pathway that goes around your composition. And banding is decorative, so it's not holding anything. Binding is purposeful. So binding is holding 2 elements together so that it maybe creates tension within the composition. So that's the difference between banding and binding. Sheltering is something over the top, where you can see on the arrangement on the left has the sheltering of the plumosa over the composition. And shadowing is where one piece is kind of behind another. So it's like two pieces that are the same that reflect one on another. And so then just working on clustering, pillowing, just make sure that you're aware at the end of this has all the definitions of the basing techniques that are potentially available for you to use. and thinking about using in your material in a creative manner. So tailoring, we talked about changing the appearance. Detailing is um, taking off little pieces, and so um, I don't know how to say that. That's different. But basing is covering the mechanics on the thing. Pave is more of a one level surface, and weaving, of course, and braiding, those different things, but that all adds creative flair to your composition. So number one, just thinking about confidence within design. So thinking about what are they, and you're not going to, and this is when you're competing a little bit more. So like in the finals, don't comparison yourself to others. Just focus on your own table. Each design is evaluated on its own merits. It's not one against another. So if you want to think about on it, you want to think about if you get a number and tablecloth, you want to have that folded up and down on the bottom, and then use that preparation time to sort and clean your flowers. Think about, can you change the personality of flowers? So, for example, like a chrysanthemum with the leaves on has a lot of crossing lines. Now, if I clean that stem up and it's just a nice clean line, when I put that into a composition, that is going to create a much different atmosphere than if I had all the leaves on that design. So it really changes the personality of the flower by tailoring the appearance. So if you're doing multiples, kind of start with your favorite design, or if you have a duplicate in our local certification, there's a duplicate in it. And so I would encourage you to start with that so that you don't use those flowers up for something else. And then thinking about if you're making multiple, what are different shapes that you can do on the table so that you can show your range of design style and techniques. And then techniques, it's not a race to the top on how many techniques you can show within a composition. So really it's three and to five max of different design techniques that you would add into a composition. So you don't want to show your whole kitchen sink in one arrangement, and make sure that it is. So next we're going to go into a little bit more of certification testing. So does anybody have any questions at this point yet? All right. So next we're going to certification. So with us being qualified as an AIFD education partner, we are allowed to certify people in from the area. So I've developed a certification program that is used by the North Dakota Florist Association and the North Central Florist Association, or North Central Florist, not Association. So we have that testing on October 2nd and October 6th, and that is a 4-hour test that starts with a written test and a flower ID test. And then the written test covers elements and principles of design, care and handling, and basic flower shop procedures and terminology. It's a 50-question multiple choice or true or false question. And then there's a flower and plant ID. You have to put the common name of the flowers or plants or foliage on that. And then the hands-on on-site testing is a 4-hour exam. So you have a 20-minute, 10-minute orientation where you find out what you have to make, and then 20 minutes to look at your flowers and product, and then we start. So then it's 4 hours to make 5 designs. The 5 designs are wedding, sympathy, flowers to wear, a vase, and a duplicate. So the duplicate is a photo that you get, like you would get wire service design, and you need to copy the scale and proportion and the flowers from that composition. So, and then you need a score of 70% or higher to pass the certification, and you must pass on all 5 designs. So you can't do 4, and then your body flower is just a single rose boutonniere that's laying on the table. So that's going to get you, just the average score isn't going to give you the 70%. So the evaluators are qualified designers that have been trained by myself. And the average designs are based on regional standards, not AIFD standards. So for this North Central and North Dakota certification, it's based on our designs from our region here. And after you've been evaluated, you can take those designs home with you. The evaluation form is very similar to the evaluation form of the Designer of the Year, with the exception of the duplicate design. So because the duplicate design, we only have 60 points because creativity is out, and what's the other thing that's out? I don't know. Two things that are worth 15 points but there's less points on it, where they're all only worth 10. So it's similar kind of thing. And then the scoring is that it's not similar, and it's a match. So it has different scoring that is done on the duplicate versus the other designs. And so just the scoring breakdown. So each of the basic designs are worth 100 points, duplicates worth 60 points. Total possible score is 460. So 70% of that is 322. So if you do above average, it's going to give you that 368, or if you do average is 338. So our median score of above average, high score of above average, 368, median score. So that's like the middle of it, because the scores have like 2 or 3 points on each one. So the low range of above average is 292. So the low range of above average is not going to pass you. So you need to be the median range of above average or the high range of above average. So average and like low above average is not going to pass. So we're looking for elevated designs and the appearance of advanced elements and principles and application within compositions. So on here, I just want to say, like, people don't aspire to earn initials and have alphabet soup behind their name. What they aspire to do is be the kind of designer that those initials represent. So getting AIFD is not going to change who you are. It'll have an influence on your life, but aspiring to be a better designer and what that represents is going to change your life. And so on here, then once we go from, if you pass the certification with the 70%, you can opt to be, have your name sent into AIFD for CFD certification. And so on the CFD certification, once I submit your name, then you have 2 weeks, and they send you an email back. Then you have 2 weeks to take a written exam online that is from the AIFD manual. And all of the definitions that I've used tonight in my manual are AIFD definitions. So the terminology that we're using throughout this session is all AIFD based. And so that you get familiar with that terminology and how that all goes. So certification is investing in yourself. It's elevating your career, but also elevating the profession that we all love. So it isn't just about earning a credential. It's about building confidence in your ability and understanding the why behind the design decisions that you make. So knowing that you're designing with purpose, you're no longer arranging flowers, just you're designing with confidence, intention, and a purpose. So I believe that certification elevates our whole industry. Floral design is an art, and it requires knowledge and technical skill and continuous learning, because those trends and those fashions are always changing. So it's just like clothing changes all the time, our floral fashions, and with the exposure on social media, we're seeing a lot of influence on that has on changing trends within design. And the more educated you become, the stronger the industry becomes. So on AIFD testing, so the PFD is a professional floral design evaluation, and that has a scale range of 1 to 5 on it. And so, and you're evaluated on each one of these components. So they're a little bit different, but so line, color, balance, proportion, dominance, creativity, unity, rhythm, contrast, and mechanics. And each one only has that 1 to 5, with that 3 being average, 4 being above average, and 5 being excellent. Now you need to have 4s and 5s and to pass on this. So you have to have, so you can get a CFD certification taking the PFD test as well. So you have to have a cumulative score of 16, just 3.2 average. So it's going to be above average. And then if you wanted to be invited to AIFD, you have to have a 20 cumulative score of your 4 designs. So that's a 4 average within it with no, so if you get a 3, you need a 5 to balance it out. And that's just going to get you to pass. So you need to have some 5s. So you got to have that excellence in floral design to be able to be above average. So 4s and 5s are what is going to allow you to pass and achieve that AIFD certification. So here the categories are wedding, sympathy, flowers to wear, arrangement, and designer choice. And we'll go into those here. So sympathy design, it can range from anything that is appropriate for a funeral or a celebration of life. And now we've seen memorial services happen in new venues. So some of that has changed as well. And then the rise of the urn has also brought other things in, and even flowers potentially delivered to the home for sympathy. So you have to be aware of ways to create all these compositions. And the traditional is probably not going to be where you're at. It's going to be more non-traditional is what you want to look at. So you're not going to be making any triangles or standard casket sprays. If you're doing a casket spray, it should be groupings and line and have that depth focal and those groupings of materials that add those visual pathways within your composition. Wedding can be any kind of brides or bridesmaids or bridal party designs. So it could be actually even various styles of wedding party designs, but predominantly, traditionally, it has been a bridal bouquet or a bridesmaid bouquet. We have thrown a flower, there's been a flower girl like in there 1 or 2 times. But that's up to the committee every time. And of course, it's going to change every year. And you just need to be aware of what the current trends are and think about on here. So your application and mechanics, make sure that bouquets are just as pretty from the backside as they are from the front. So professional application and mechanics is a finished back. If you have plastic, a holder or anything like that, all of that holder or stem should be covered. And then you normally are provided with finishing sprays. So you do want to make sure that you're using that finishing spray to make sure that your bouquets last through the judging. Flowers to wear is boutonnieres, corsages, crowns, wristlets, over the shoulder pieces. And so you'll be given glue, floral adhesive, and U-glue are standard items that you get. And so thinking about attention to detail and mechanics, even when you're doing a boutonniere, what are the little details that you can add? So to add the texture, add your focal, add the depth on here. So you see the boutonniere has just a little bit of lily grass going from one side to the other. So it has dynamic lines and static lines with the bamboo that's on the backer there. And then the placement of the hypericum. So you see the textural differences between the moss and the hypericum. So the earthiness of the moss and the shininess of the hypericum. So even on small pieces. And then this necklace down on the right side was actually created by a student. And it's one of my favorite pieces ever, but really a very different look on it. But kind of think about practicing some maybe wired techniques that could be used. So you do some kind of base, and then it could be made into a necklace. It could be made into a hair piece. It could be made into a wristlet. It could be made into a leg wrap. And so just be aware of having kind of a base technique in your pocket so that you can have time to make something a little bit more creative. And then arrangement. Now arrangement here could be centerpieces, party and event designs, hospital designs, or presentation designs. It can be any broad range of designs, and they're going to give you like a specific space maybe that it's at. So is it on a high top table or is it on a 60-inch round? So that goes to scale and proportion on it. And so on here, you just need to make sure that you're doing the required design style and application, and the size and scale on it are proportion to where they're having you place the design. So, and then designer choice is a creative use of the material. So it replaces the duplicate on the international test or national test. And so it's a place for you to show your own personality. So it's time to show creative placement of techniques and flower placement, practice potentially for some use of wires or some foliage or flower manipulation. Think about adding that creativity, negative space and flair, and there's no size or shape restrictions. It just needs to fit on the table with the other design. So think about adding that creativity. Tell your story. Show some specific technique that you might have practiced. So you don't know what foliages you'll get, but the flowers and such, when you're practicing for the PFDE, they have a specific budget that they have to hit. So there is going to be some carnations, some roses. There'll be line flowers, and there'll be a variety of foliages, but you don't know what mix that you're going to get. So you do have to be kind of broad in your area of knowing what to do, what treatments you can do with potentially different things that you get. So this is just a diagram of stem placement, and this is the definitions from the AIFD manual. So spiral, parallel, abstract, radial, and integrated where it's one or more. And then here's the definitions of the basing techniques. So these are more specific definitions, and so that you just should be aware, because some of these things might be things that you're asked to do. So on the arrangement, you need to include a banding technique. So you would have to have some sort of decorative material that was added to your different floral elements that would be banding. And then here's insertion applications and physical applications. So that's just a variety of techniques and stuff that everybody should be aware of. And just want to make sure you know the definitions of that, may be asked to it. So any questions now? Theme is out. Yeah, the theme is okay, I have no brain left. Garden party glam. And so
I had a
and then
question.
yeah,
For when we're doing the testing for the North Dakota certified testing or whatever, do they give you wire? Because you said we can do for like corsages or necklaces,
Yes.
hair pieces. Are they they're giving us wire?
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
yeah. And they'll give you U-glue and floral adhesive
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
So for flowers to wear. And then on the florals, it's like divided into like, a specific amount of line flowers, a specific amount of mass flowers, and then form flowers, and then foliage. So all of that is taken into consideration so that you get a broad range of materials to make those choices to make your composition. And container-wise, usually there's 2 choices per project of containers. Or there may be a specific container that's specified for one. Well, the duplicate is obviously it's the same container, but and then so any other questions? So then just we have a couple new classes coming up. So Power of Color is going to be a class on August 18th, and this is a brand new class that really kind of discusses the impact of color on design and such. And then we have a guest instructor that was just confirmed today, so I don't have the flyer yet, but Deborah De La Flor of De La Flor Gardens in Fort Lauderdale is coming for the September 29th class. And so that's going to be artistic floral design. So she is an internationally known designer that has judged the World Cup and just has an immense amount of passion for design. And so that'll be great to have her come and do a class with us. But so that is it for today. Holy moly. But so I really appreciate everybody being here, and I know this will be recorded. So if you're watching this at a later date, I thank you for joining us and wish you the best of luck with your certification and also competition dreams and goals. And I hope that you're inspired to participate in competitions and elevate your designs into the next level and just challenge yourself to reach higher than you think possible. So, farm kid from central Minnesota, and I have been able to travel the world with floral design. So I really hope that I can inspire somebody else to follow my footsteps. Thank you all so
Thank you.
much. All right.
Bye.
Good night.